How did it go for everybody?
Pretty good.
Yeah, I felt pretty good about mine.
All right, I think I'm all set up here, so I'm gonna go ahead and jump right into it. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna start from this story number 3 here, and then I'm gonna get into these 2 extensions. I have the model relationships built out and all those tests passing. I didn't build out the other 2 stories, so as I go through this first story, when I visit a project show page, what you probably ran into was you already had this project show page built out. So it'd be a little repetition from the first story, but mostly we're gonna go over this story and then the 2 extensions. Yeah, as I go, feel free to stop me or interrupt me at any point. I'm going to try to, I'm gonna try and model what I want you all to do. So I'll try and like, do this as if this was my actual development process, so that you can see like how I would actually approach this story. So with that in mind, I will like pause for questions, but I'm not going to be keeping a close eye on the participants panel or anything. So if you have something, feel free to just unmute yourself and speak up. Cool. All right, let's get into it. Okay. So user story 3 of 3, as a visitor, when I visit a project show page, I see a count of the number of contestants on this project. So right off the bat, when I see something like this, I see a count of the number of contestants on this project. That to me is screaming data logic. That is some sort of like something you're gonna have to do in the database, counting contestants that are associated with the project. And so I know because I'm doing some data logic there, I eventually want to have a model method. So I want to have a model method. So there's 2 ways that I could go about this. Because I need a model method, I also need a model test for that method. So I could do this bottom up or top down. I could say, well, I'm going to work from the top level, from the feature level, and sort of work my way until I get to a point where I need this model method. Or I could say I'm going to work bottom up. I'm going to make sure that I have the model method working, and then I'm going to work on the feature. So for this one, I'm just going to do bottom up. Real no reason. I just think that that's a good place to start. So yeah, let's do it. So I see a count of the number of contestants on this project. So when I see the number of contestants on this project, what that's kind of telling me is that this is, this query is kind of built off of the concept of this project. So because this is referring to a specific project, we're on a project show page, what I'm imagining is that I want a project instance method. So I'm gonna go over to my app here, and I'm going to jump into my model folder here, and I'm gonna go to my project spec. And so I've got some tests in here. So I'm gonna make a new describe block, and I'm gonna say I'm gonna describing, let's say I'm describing instance methods, do. And you'll see some different syntaxes for how to like set up your test for these model methods. I like to do it like this. I'll say describe, and then I'm gonna use the pound symbol to represent an instance method. If you think back to class versus instance methods from mod 1 or reading the Ruby docs, we use the pound to indicate instance method, and we use dot to indicate class method. So I'll say describe dot, and then I think what I want to call this method is, what am I doing? I'm counting the number of contestants for a project, so I will call this method contestant count. Contestant count. So describe this contestant count instance method. It will say returns the number of contestants. Something else that I will do sometimes as I'm building out these tests is I'll kind of just like write out my if blocks first. So I'll just say like, what are all the things that this method should do? So I also want to account for edge cases. So I want to say something like it returns 0 when there are no contestants, something like that. So I'll just kind of start off with writing out these if blocks so I can describe in English what I want this to do, and then I'll worry about making the test. And what that'll look like, you might not have seen this before, but if I make an it without a do block and I run this,
¿Alguien tocó la puerta?
it's going to show it as a skipped test here. So all of these tests are skipped, and it'll kind of remind me to build these out. So for this first one, what do I want this to do? So return the number of contestants. So what I'm going to need is I'm going to need an actual project. So let me jump over to my seed file and grab a project. So I have new chic, which goes off of the recycled material challenge. So we probably don't need this second challenge here. Cool. So I've got one challenge, and then I build my project off of that challenge. And so now, oh, and now I need contestants. Okay. So I'm gonna go back to the seeds file and grab some contestants. And yeah, DK, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I guess I would like some like sanity check. I didn't do this in my models. I did this in my controller spec. Like I went through and made a show spec for what is it, projects, and I built the test there. Would you?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do both. So I'm gonna have to build both the feature test and the model test in this case. So that's kind of what I was talking about when I said like top down or bottom up. Bottom up, I'm starting with the model test. If I was going top down, I would start with the feature test. So either way, I'm gonna have to build both of those things out. It's just I decided to start from the model.
Got it, thank you.
Yeah, it's not that I'm gonna skip the feature test. It's just I know I'm gonna need this eventually. Okay, so I've got my contestants, and then given my many-to-many, I need to, yeah, contestants have many projects. I need to somehow add these contestants to my news sheet. So there's a couple ways to do this. I'm gonna do it with the shovel. So I'm gonna say newssheet.contestants shovel in J, and then we'll shovel in J, Gretchen, and Kentaro, just like that. So now that my new chic has 3 contestants, I should be able to say expect new chic contestant count. So I'll call the method and I will expect that to return to me the value of 3. Any questions on my test here? Sorry, let me move my Zoom windows around just a second. I'll go back. There we go.
Just a little post just to copy it. Like I would like to have it too.
Angel?
Are you only writing a model test because you're creating a method called contestant count?
I don't know if I would use the word only. I would say I am creating a contestant count method. So I'm going to have a corresponding model test for it. So that's what we say when we say like your model should be 100% tested. You should always, like anytime you have a model method, there should be a test for it in your model test file.
So like for mine, I just changed a couple methods. So I said like new sheet contestants.count.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have anything in my model that I could test. So that's why.
Yeah, let's talk about that when we get to the feature. Yeah, I'll show you that version. And Angel, if I forget, just remind me. I want to go through that version and just talk about why we wouldn't do that.
Okay.
Drew? Do you have a Drew?
Sorry, I'm an idiot, basically. So by shoveling contestants into the project.contestants, is that doing the action of creating the join table or the join table objects, I guess?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what Drew is kind of referring to is that I could accomplish the same thing by manually creating a contestant project. So I could say contestant project.create, and then I could say the contestant is, who is this, Jay? And then the project is new chic. I could do that same exact thing. This syntax is just kind of like more, I would say readable, and this one is more explicit about what's going on in the database. I want you to know both. I want you to know how to do both of these. Anything else? Adike?
Yeah, I'm just a little nervous that I might be in the wrong room because I didn't do any of these model tests. Like I didn't think about this. And so do you think that's something that Tim's like going through?
He will probably go through this towards the end of his review. Yeah, if you want to jump out and jump into his room, feel free to do that. I don't have any problem with that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so let me run this, and I want to run this specific file. So I'll say I'll run my project spec file. Okay, and I've hit my first failure. So no method error, undefined method, contestant count for a project instance, which is what I would expect because I said there was a method and there is no method. So we'll jump over to our project file and we will make it. So def contestant count, and let's run it again. Okay, so now project instance method contestant count returns the number of contestants. So it expected to get 3, but it got nil. That makes sense to me because this method that I made is empty, so it's not returning anything. So let's do it. So inside this method, this is an instance method. Inside any instance methods, inside an instance method, we can refer to self as the instance itself. So this self is going to refer to a project instance. So on that project instance, I know that my project has associations to contestant projects, and it has an association to contestants through contestant projects. So I can use this association here and say self.contestants. And then I can use my handy active record method to count those contestants. So now let me run my model test. and that is now passing. Another thing that I could do is I could pry in here just to show you what's going on. And I can drop this code into my pry. And then I could run a .to SQL. Oh, that's not going to work. Yeah, it's not going to let me call it on the .count.
It's because the .count is a Ruby method and not a SQL method?
No, it's because it's an active record calculation. Yeah, that's okay. I'll just move on. Does anyone have any questions about this model method that I've made? I can, real quick, let me do the second part of this. So I want to make sure that it can return 0. Sorry, 1 second. So let's just not add any contestants. And then we would expect this to still handle the case when it's 0. So I think this is going maybe a little bit further than what your instincts might have been on this in this testing, but you do want to make sure you're handling edge cases. So yeah, this code here will handle that 0 edge case. Okay.
I think a few of us just went ahead and threw in @project.contestants.count in our HTML ERB for show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, I'll get there when we get into the feature testing and talk about why that's not happening. That's okay if that was like for this challenge, that was your instinct. I want you to start developing that like developer spidey sense of when you need to make a model method. So to me, when I see like data logic like this, even though it's pretty small, this is still logic that I don't want to do anywhere else. I want to do this in my model. And so that triggers in my brain, like I need a model method, I need a model test. So if you're not there yet, that's fine, but that's where I want you to go. So let's get into that feature test right now, unless anyone has any other questions. Okay, so I think for the models for the feature test, the first thing I'm going to need is a new features folder. So we'll say features, and then this is going to be a project show page. So I'll make a projects folder, and then inside projects, I will make a show spec.rb. I will require my Rails helper, and I'll say rspec.describe project show page. And then this specific test is for it shows the contestant count for each project. Oh, wait, sorry. For the project. Because we're on a show page, we're only going to have one project. Cool. So I'm going to go back to that model test that I made and just copy and paste that setup. Yeah. Because I think this will have pretty much everything that I'll need. And I'll go ahead and do this in a before each, because I know there's other tests that I'm gonna want to have for this show page. So we'll have an @recycled materials challenge. We'll then make @newsheik using that @recycled material challenge. We'll have @jaggression @kentaro. Change these. Change them all to instance variables. Cool. I can run my test just as is. So I can say spec features project show spec. And just to see if it's okay with all of this setup, just to make sure I didn't cause any errors there. So that looks good. It ran my one example and it didn't have any issues. So now I should be able to go to that project show page. So I'll say visit /project/ not project @newsheik.id. And so what am I expecting here? So I always want to make sure I'm reading my story as I'm building out this test. So as a visitor, when I visit a project show page, I see a count of the number of contestants on this project. Okay, easy enough. So I can say expect page.to have content, and I'm expecting it to have some sort of identifier here. So like number of contestants. And then in here, I'm going to interpolate @newsheik.contestant count. So I've made this method, I've tested it, so I know that it works. So now I can actually reuse this method in my test, which is nice. And so now this is dynamic. So an alternative here would be, I could just say like, let me duplicate this line and then comment it out. So I could say, rather than having this in here, I could just say like number of contestants 3. And this is great. But then what happens if my setup changes? If my setup changes to where now there's like 4 or 5 or 2 contestants, then I would have to go in here and change this expectation, and it gets kind of tedious, right? So I prefer this version so that it will dynamically change the expectation if for some reason the number of contestants changed, if the setup changed at all. So I'm going to prefer this version, the first line over here, over this second version. So avoid this.
Brian, I have a quick question.
Uh-huh.
And this might be the piece you're going to follow up on in a little bit. But so would you say you wouldn't want just to be like contestants dot count, and like not the method, but just the.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't want to do that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll get there.
Cool. Thanks.
So I'm going to run this test. This is going to be slightly different for your process just because I haven't built out the show page yet. So this is kind of going back to the first story. So the first thing I'm going to get is no route matches. So we'll jump to our routes file and make the route. So it's a get to /projects/ and then the ID of the project. And this is going to route to my projects controller show. So sticking to my RESTful routing here. So I've got my route. The next thing that I expected to hit is the controller. So I would expect to see uninitialized constant projects controller, just like that. So now I'm going to make the file. I'm going to touch app controllers projects controller.rb. And I'm going to run my test again because I want to see Rails tell me that it couldn't auto load it, because that tells me that I spelled the file name right. So that's what I got. Now I can open up my projects controller and make my projects controller inside this file. Cool.
What was the auto load error?
This one, it says unable to auto load constant projects controller expected, and then that file I just made, users Brian Turing 2 module 206, 2006 challenges, make it work, root, blah, 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 projects controller to define it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So this basically says like, I found this file, this is where I thought it was going to be, but it's empty, or there's no class in there. Yeah. So after I make the constant, after I make my class up here, then I'm expecting to not get the action. So there we go. The action show could not be found. So then I'll create def show. And then after that, I'm expecting it to not find the view. So this is the rhythm of TDD when it comes to making out these pages. So there's my no view error. So inside app views, I'm going to make a new folder for projects. Let me start over. Projects. And I'm going to make a new file in here called show.html.erb and run my test again. So now that I have the view, I'm expecting that no view error to go away and for it to just say, I didn't see, copy bar to say I didn't see what I was expecting it to see. And that's what we get. Expected to find text number of contestants 3 in my empty string here. So let's just make a paragraph tag here and let's say number of contestants, colon, and then, yeah, sometimes the equal tab or the dash tab shortcut won't work if you're like up against a square bracket or an angle bracket, which is weird. Anyway, okay, in here, I'm imagining that I have a project and then I could just call .contestant count on it. And let me split the screen here with the controller. So I want to have an app project over here in my view, but I haven't set it up in my controller. So I'm going to get undefined method contestant count for nil class. So my app project is nil. So I need to set it. So I'll say app project equals. And then I need to find the appropriate project. Because I called that placeholder in my route a ID, I should be able to reference it with params ID. That should indicate to me the ID of the project. So then we should be able to find it and then pass it to the view through this instance variable. And that is what we get. So then the last thing that I would do here is I would run Rails S. And I've already run Rails DB seed earlier, so I should have some seeds in here. So I should be able to go to localhost 3000 projects 1 and see that data appear on this page. So now that I've checked it in development and it looks like I expect it to look like, now I'm good. So I would like commit and do that. So I'm done with the story. Okay. I want to now talk about the MVC portion of this. So I'm using this model method that I made here. Now I don't have to do this. I could make this work by doing this at .contestants.count. So I think this is what some of you are telling me that that you did. Yeah, I don't think I need the split here. So the issue with this is it really breaks our MVC principles. Our MVC principles are that the model should be handling our data logic, the view should be handling our presentation logic, and our controllers should be handling our application logic or our business logic. So what that means is that in the view, I should not see any sort of like data logic at all. And so counting the number of contestants, that's going to count as your data logic. And I'll show you what I was trying to do earlier in the Rails console. This might not seem like data logic, and I think someone earlier even said like .count, that's a Ruby method, right? Let's actually see what happens. Let's go, let's find a project. So let's say project.first here. And then let's call .contestant count and see what happens. And so what we're going to see here is that this method that we called triggered, this first SQL query right here is just for finding the first project. The SQL query for counting the number of contestants is right here. And if you look closely at this query, what you'll see is that it is doing the count in the SQL query. See this first part right here, select count.star from contestants, and it's doing an inner join and it's doing all of that. So while this .count method is a Ruby method for arrays, this contestants right here is not a regular array. This is an active record relation. And so we're actually doing an active record method call right here. So this is very much all happening in the database. And because it is happening in the database, I want to make a model method for it. So I mentioned to you all, like, if you're not there yet, like, that's okay. But I want you to start trying to like frame your thinking this way. If I see any sort of like manipulation of data or calculation or anything, that should be a model method. And if you have a model method, you need a model test as well. On Monday, we're going to have a class called MVC in action. And in that class, we're going to do some peer review and we're going to look out for some of these like red flags of breaking MVC. Another alternative approach here is you might say like, okay, we don't want this to be in the view, so let's do something like this. Let's make a variable called @contestant_count. And then in our controller, we can do that. So we could say @contestant_count equals @project.contestants.count, like this. So I can run my test and this will work as well. The issue with this is the same issue as before. When I said I don't want my data logic to be in my view, I also don't want my data logic to be in my controller. This is just moving it from one place I don't want it to another place that I don't want. really there's only one right place for this kind of code to belong, and it's in the model. Angela?
Can you give an example of business logic? Because I don't know that I know what that would be.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the controller, it should only handle business logic. I think the best way for you to think about business logic it is any logic that is not model logic or presentation logic. I think that's the easiest way to think of it. It's kind of like, it doesn't belong in the model, it doesn't belong in the view. I think the way to think of your application logic, if I want to get like more technical about it, I would say that it is, it handles coordination between the model and the view. So for instance, like dealing with the params, a lot of times the controller needs to take the params and then pass it over to the view. So that's what I mean by like coordinating an interaction with the viewer, with the model. Maybe I want to do something like, maybe I'm somehow accepting a parameter for the sorting of it. And so then I might have a method like project.sort by, and then I could pass it this parameter, something like that. So passing appropriate data off to the model, that's an example. Does that help, Angela?
Yeah.
This is an idea that we're going to continue to iterate on throughout this mod. Any other questions?
Brian?
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm following what you're saying about all the data logic is handled in the model and all that. And you said, because that's how it should be, but I guess I'm just curious why, like if we're using that Ruby style, is it more expensive? Does it take up more, like why is it not how we want to do it?
Why don't you want to do the Ruby version? Yeah, so first of all, let me just like illustrate what it might look like if we did use the Ruby way of doing things. So if I just change my query around a little bit, so I'll say project.first. Let me actually do this. I'll save it to a variable. So I say project equals project.first. And then I'll say project.contestants.length. Here, .length is going to use the Ruby method. So now we can see our SQL query got a little bit more simple. It's just doing the select from contestants here, and it's grabbing the correct contestants, and then it's using Ruby.length to calculate it. So that's what that might look like. The reason that you don't want to do this is because the database is very efficient at manipulating data, and it's way more efficient than Ruby. So if we had, notice how here we have, let's try this. Let's try 1,000 times do, let's create a contestant. Let's say project.contestants. Actually, let's do it like this. Let's do it in the seed file. So let's jump over to the seed file. And I'm just gonna make, let's do this. Say 1,000 times do. We'll make a Aaron, and we'll assign Aaron to our project, which would be, let's be more specific. Let's say news chic dot contestants shovel in Aaron. And this will make a lot of duplicate errands, but I think that's okay. Yeah, so let's do Rails DB seed. I don't think we have any like unique naming constraints or anything like that. So we're making a bunch of contestants. It's thinking. Dang it. Undefined local variable or method Aaron on line 32. Oh, yeah, so when we're trying to reference it down here, okay, let me just throw Aaron back in here. Thinking. Cool. Okay, so that worked. So we'll jump into our console. And now let's do project.first. I want to make sure this is my news sheet. Yes, it is. Okay, cool. So let's say project equals project.first. And now let's do project.contestants.count. Boom, okay. And then conversely, let's do the same thing with .length. Oh no, it's gonna be, oh, that's lame. Yeah, we're not really gonna be able to measure this. Huh?
Can you do dot size?
Like this instead of .length?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'll do the same thing.
Did you expect it to have 1,000?
No. Oh, yeah. Why is it not working? Dot length. Yeah, why is it not 1,000?
Is it because your seed doesn't? I mean, I may be wrong. Is it because your seed is for your like the development, not the test? And you're in the you're in Rails console. Never mind.
Yeah, I ran Rails console, so this should be my development environment. So I made an errand up here. I shoveled that in to new chic.
Brian, do you have to restart the console maybe since you seeded it?
I don't think so. The console should always, these queries should always give me the snapshot of what's in the database. Do I have like two? I probably have two named new chic. That's probably what it is. Let me do project.all here. Yeah, I just like have made a bunch of new chics. Yeah, let's do this. Project.where name news chic. And let's just say dot last. And let's say project equals. And I can use the underscore to reference the last thing. So now I should have my project here. Let's try this again. Contestants. That seems like more. Let's do dot count. There we go. Okay. Now I'm back to where I want to be. Let me do this again. Let me try this. Yeah, so there's not going to be a good way to like really illustrate this. What I'm trying to pay attention to is on the left here, I'm trying to pay attention to how long each of these queries is taking. And this one is going to take, this first one we can see takes 2.8 milliseconds. And this one over here is going to take 6.3 milliseconds. Keep in mind that this query, this 6.3, is only for getting the contestants. That doesn't include the time that it takes to actually load the contestants. And now I think I see what someone was referring to when we said when we should try dot size. So anyway, we can see like from right here that this version is going to be a lot faster than this version, and this version doesn't include the time that it takes to run the dot length. So that was like kind of a roundabout way of going about it. But the point is that Ruby is always going to be less efficient than your SQL queries, than Active Record. So Active Record and SQL and the database, all of these are tools that are built specifically for handling data. And so they are much more efficient with this data. This really comes, you might not notice a difference when we only have like, even 1,000 records is kind of low, but once we start dealing with like millions of records or even like hundreds of thousands, that's when you really start to notice a performance difference. And we want our queries to be optimal. In Mod 3, you should talk a little bit more about optimizing your queries, and we're kind of starting that conversation now. Any other questions? Cool. I'm going to do the next story. So I'll go back to my stories here. And now we're getting into the first extension. So extensions, user story 1, user story extension 1, average years of experience for contestant by project. So as a visitor, when I visit a project show page, I see the average years of experience for the contestants that worked on a project. Okay, so e.g. lit fit, material, challenge theme, number of contestants, and then the average contestant experience here. Okay, so this is very similar to the last one where I'm trying to display some model logic here. So I think what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to skip over this one for now and come back to it if I have time. I think that this one will be more valuable because it's a little bit different. So as a visitor, when I visit a project show page, I see a form to add a contestant to this project. When I fill out a field with an existing contestant's ID and hit add contestants to project, I'm taken back to the project show page, and I see that the number of contestants has increased by 1. And when I visit the contestants index page, I see the project listed under the contestant's name. There's a lot there. Okay, so I'm gonna copy and paste this story into my test so that I can just kind of keep track of what I'm doing. So because this says I'm visiting a project show page, and on that show page, I see a form, that's kind of telling me that most of the heavy lifting is happening in the project show page. So I think I'm going to stick with this show spec and just make a new test in here. So let's say it can add a contestant to the project. So I'm just going to copy this line from my other test to visit the show page. And then I should see a form to add a contestant to this project. When I fill out a field with an existing contestant's ID, okay. So I think what I'm going to need in order to be able to do this is another contestant. So I've got a couple contestants here. These are all the contestants that are on the project. Let's make another one, and let's put this contestant kind of separate from the other ones, just so we can kind of indicate that it is not part of this project yet. So I'll say at, and let's actually call this one, let's call this one new contestant for that same reason. Really want to illustrate it's not on this project yet. And we'll say, let's just say this is Brian. Sure, hometown, he's very experienced, very inexperienced. Cool. Okay, so now I've got a contestant to add. So when I see a form to add a contestant, I fill out the field with an existing contestant's ID. So let's say fill in, and I think I want my form to be called contestant ID. My form field to be called contestant ID with, and then we'll say at new contestant dot ID. So take that new contestant's ID, fill in this form. So I've handled that, and then we'll say, and so this is the name of the button, it looks like. So let's then click button, add contestant to project. Cool. And this is very much my process. I'll like look at the user story and I'm kind of just like going line by line. How do I capture this idea in my test? So then I'm taken back to the project show page. So then I should expect my current path to be the project show page. So it's this. I see the number of contestants has increased by 1. I'm actually not gonna like have a specific expectation for this, because I think based on my model testing, I can be confident that this is always gonna dynamically change based on the number of contestants. But I can do this part. So then I visit the contestants index page and I see the project listed under that contestant's name. So then let's visit /contestants. So I'm at a contestants index page, and then I expect to see the project listed under that contestant's name. So I think on this contestants index page, I should be able to target their specific section with a within. So I should say within contestant dash, and then we'll interpolate my new contestant ID in here. So they should have their own section. And within that section, I should see the project listed. So in here, I should expect the page to have content at newchic.name. Yeah. Any questions about my test? Give you all a minute to look at it. Okay. So let me run this. So the first thing that I'm expecting it to be able to visit the page just fine, but then it's not going to be able to fill in this form because we don't have it yet. So unable to find field contestant ID that is not disabled. So let's go ahead and make that form. And I'm specifically saying form because the user has to like type in some input. So anytime they're typing something in, we're going to need a form. So I will say, I'm going to use my visible ERB tag because I want to show this form. So I'll make a form tag. And let's hold off on the verb and the path for now. And let's just try to make that field. So I think I want let's call this a number field tag because it's an ID. So I'll say number field tag, and we'll label this contestant ID. My syntax highlighting looks a little off here. Whenever this happens in Atom, at least, I click on this little file indicator here, and it says like file uses ERB grammar. I think if I change this to this version, Ruby ERB, I just like the syntax highlighting better. So if you find that helpful. Okay, so I've made my input. Let's see if it can find it now. Cool. So it found my input. Now it can't find the button, so let's make the button. So now I want a submit tag, and we'll say this is add contestant to project. So let's run it again, see if it can find that button. Okay, so now what we're going to get is we're going to get no route matches post to /project/30. So what's going on is because we haven't told our form tag what HTTP method to use or what path to submit to, it's making some assumptions for us. So first of all, it's defaulting to a post request. So a form tag is just always going to default to a post request. So that's why it says no route matches post here. And then it's using the path that we're currently on. So because we're on the project show page, it's just trying to post to that same route right there. So it's making a lot of assumptions for us. So now here's the part where I, as a developer, need to think through what route makes sense for this to go to. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to think through like what is actually going to happen in the database when I do this. If I go back to my show spec, I can actually see an example of what's supposed to happen. So I'm adding a contestant to my project. In my setup here, I can see how we add a contestant to a project, and it's with this line of code. And we actually, we had this discussion earlier, but what's going to go on under the hood is that we're going to create a new contestant project. So the route that I'm going to have this submit to is I'm going to have it go to the contestant project create route. So following my RESTful routing, that would be a post to /contestant projects. So in here, I can say, I want to post to /contestant projects with a method of post like this. Now, when I submit this form, actually, let's just see what happens. So now I'm getting no route matches post to /contestant project. So I want to create a new contestant project. So let's jump over to our routes. And let's make it, so let's say post to /contestant projects to contestant projects. Create. So this is where I'm really trying to like keep things restful. So let's see if you can find that route now. Okay, it found the route, but it just doesn't have the controller. So let's go ahead and make the controller, touch app controllers contestant projects.rb, and run that so I can see my auto load error. No, okay. So this is why I do this. I thought I made the controller, but I didn't spell the file name right. And so I didn't see my auto load constant error. So that tells me like, hey, dummy, double check, not dummy, but hey, go back and double check your spelling, right? And so the issue here is that I didn't add underscore controller. So let me do that. And let me also make sure I delete the one that is incorrect. So I'll delete this version. And run it again. Cool, okay, now I get my auto load error. So it tells me it found the file. So inside this file, we'll say, we're making our contestant projects controller, which inherits from application controller. So now when I run this, I'm expecting it to not have the action. So we get the action create could not be found. So we'll say def create and run it again. Here's the part of my test where I'm expecting it to redirect back to the project show page. So it's expecting it to be on this path, but it's still on my contestant projects path. So let's, in here, let's redirect them to our projects page. So let's go to /projects/ uh-oh, I've just run into a huge problem. So I want to redirect them back to my project show page, but how do I know what project I'm dealing with? So a lot of times when I need some data in the controller, I'm going to pry into my controller and I want to check out what's in my params. What data am I currently sending to this action? So I'm in my pry, I'll check out params. And I'll see my contestant ID here, which is great. That's what I want. But I don't see anything here that actually gives me access to the project. And that's kind of a bummer. So again, here as a developer, I am going to make the decision that I need to send that project ID as well. And I need to figure out how I'm going to send that. So there's a couple ways you could do that. One way that you could do it is in our form. We could add something like a hidden field tag, something like this, and this would send over a hidden like project ID for us. What I'm going to do instead, so this is one thing you can look at in your own time if you're curious. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to use my nested resources principles, and I'm going to include the project ID in this route. So let me jump back to my controller. This is my projects controller. Yeah, and let me undo some of this stuff that I had done before. So this should be at project.contestant count. So I'm going to include the project in the route here. So I actually want to submit this to /projects/ and then interpolate the ID of my project in here. And then you'll see my syntax highlighting hasn't changed. It's because I'm trying to interpolate in single quotes, which won't work. So we'll change these single quotes to double quotes. Let me take out the split. So now my route is my nested route here where I include the project ID. And so let's run that and see what happens. So now because I'm using a different route, it doesn't recognize this new route. So no route matches post to /projects 46 contestant projects.
Ryan, would you say it would be unrestful to do like contestant projects /prod or then the ID?
Like this? So
yes.
Maybe something like that?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I would say it's not RESTful because whenever you have a route of according to our RESTful routes, when we have /contestant project / and then an ID, that would look more like a contestant project show. It wouldn't match. Yeah, even though it's a post, the URI would still indicate that's referencing a specific contestant project. The RESTful way to do it is the way that I'm going to do it right now.
Okay, that makes sense.
So I'll go to /project / and then here I want to accept a project ID / contestant projects. And let's see where this gets us. Cool, so this now I'm back to the pry in my controller. So now when I check out my params, I see both my contestant ID and I see my project ID in there as well. Notice that this contestant ID, the key in my params hash here, this comes from the form. So if I look back at my form, in here I called it contestant ID. The project ID, this key comes from my routes. So because I called it project ID in my route, that's where that keyword comes from. Cool. So back to my contestant projects controller, I now feel like I have all the information that I need to do what I need to do in the database. So what I need to do in the database is I need to, so the first thing I want to do is I want to find my project. So let's say project equals project.find params project ID. Let me take out my routes as well. We don't need that anymore. So I find my project based on that project ID param, and then I should be able to, let's also find the contestant. So contestant is going to equal contestant.find params, and that was my contestant ID. And now I should be able to create my new contestant project. So I should be able to say contestant project.create. For this project and for this contestant. And now after I do that, I can redirect back to the project show page based on the project that I already have. Let's see how far this gets us. Cool. So now I'm at the point where I have no route matches /contestants. This story said, like, I expect to see this project listed on the contestant index page. I'm not going to quite go that far because that would just be me building out the index page, and I don't know how valuable that's going to be. But I think I'm at the, I've done what I wanted to do for this story. I think it's really important to notice here also that there's a couple, just like in the test, there was a couple different ways for me to create a contestant project. Same thing here. There's a couple different ways for me to achieve this. Rather than this syntax here, I could do this. I could say project.contestants shovel in this contestant. I could do it like that. I could also, because I just care about the IDs, I don't actually need to find these objects. I could just skip finding them and put their IDs directly in here like this. And this would work as well. And you could argue that this is a little bit more efficient because we don't waste time going and finding these records from the database if we don't need to. That, oh.
Brian, is that considered more secure that way too? Just curious.
I would not say this is more secure
No.
What's going on right here? So I've got active record association type mismatch. Project expected got 52, which is a string. So here, because I'm using the ID, I need to specify this as project ID, and this is contestant ID. So project would be referring to a project object. Project ID is referring to an ID. Cool. So now we're back to where we were.
Brian, I have a quick question about your routes.
Uh-huh.
You put, I was just curious why you put the contestant projects on the end, because I didn't do that and mine was working. Is that necessary, or is it just kind of like to help distinguish, I guess, what's going on?
Yeah, it's not necessary to have this here, but it is RESTful. So this is, if I'm trying to create a new contestant project, having this as part of the path would be RESTful. So it's like not necessary, but it's best practice. In the same vein, I could have this go to a different controller. Like there's no reason I couldn't route this to the project's controller. Again, it just wouldn't be RESTful.
For some reason in my mind, I thought that wherever you were the post was, I thought you wanted it. I thought that was the URL that we wanted in the in line 4, like wherever the actual new contestant is being created, I guess, or being posted. So I don't know why I thought that, but that's good to know.
Gotcha. Yeah, so an important thing to keep in mind is that in this story, the contestant already exists and the project already exists. So you're not creating a contestant, you're not creating a project, you're creating a contestant project.
Got it. Yeah, it makes sense.
And this is nice because this really is forcing your understanding of what's going on at the database level. So as backend developers, your top priority is modeling the data using Ruby, using code, and manipulating the data using your code. So it all comes back to the database. So that's why it's really important to understand what's going on in the database. Any other thoughts, comments, questions before we wrap up? Leah.
I've had some cases where I wanted the same controller action to redirect to different places, and I wasn't sure if that was like bad practice to do that.
No, I think that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we can, and we'll run into that scenario next project where based on, we don't have users yet, but in the next project, we'll have a story that says, based on what type of user you are, if you're an admin user, if you're a regular user, whatever, it'll redirect you to different places. So yeah, okay. I could have in here something like, if the user, I know you haven't seen current user yet, but just go with me. If this is an admin, maybe we direct them to like a special admin path. Otherwise, redirect them somewhere else. Yeah, okay. That's fine.
It felt weird doing it, but I wasn't sure if it was allowed or not. Cool. Thank
you. At this point, there's probably a lot of things that feel like, oh, they haven't shown us how to do that yet, or we haven't like discussed this. But I would highly encourage you to explore and like try to break things, do things in different ways. Like that will only help you learn, and learning is the most important thing. Like if you come to a project eval with like some wonky code that's not exactly what we want, but you learned a lot, that's more important to me than you come with the code exactly the way that I want it.
Okay. I could see a use case if you added the project or added the contestant to the project from the show contestant page instead, or something like that. You're changing it from multiple places, but you want to redirect to different places.
Yeah. So you want to redirect back to the page that you came from, maybe?
Yeah, I did like a redirect back, but I don't know if that's like bad.
I think it's okay. Yeah. Again, okay. I highly encourage you to explore and branch out a little.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. I think this is a good place to wrap up. Thank you very much for your time. Please go and support the community and attend one of our hobby spikes. We've got some instructors who are hobby spiking and some students as well. And then we'll see y'all for Cohort Retro.
Hey, Brian, is it okay to push the update? Will that affect, like if I push it to my repo, will that affect what I sent you, or should I wait until tomorrow or something like that?
If you push to your repo,
yeah. I can wait.
I would say try and wait. If you have code, if you really have code that you want to push up, I would push it to a branch, and before you merge it to your main or master branch.
I wanted just to have the stuff that you taught us, like on my record server, and then I'll wait. Thank you.
You're welcome.